The moment a stranger slid a thin manila envelope across my table at Pine Creek Cafe and whispered, "You'll need this tonight, Mrs. Sterlingford," I knew my quiet life was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces I'd never be able to put back together. The cafe sat at the edge of town where Highway 26 narrowed to 2 lanes, and the Oregon pines pressed close enough to scrape your side mirrors if you drifted. I'd been coming here every Thursday afternoon for 14 months, ever since Leopold died, because it smelled like baked apples and old wood, and because Ruth, the owner, never asked me how I was doing. She just poured my coffee and let me sit. That particular Thursday in late October, the sky hung low and gray the way it always did before the first real storm of the season. I was sitting at my usual table by the window, watching the wind push leaves across the empty parking lot, when I felt her presence. She appeared so suddenly I startled, my hand knocking against my water glass. The woman was maybe in her early 50s, with iron gray hair pulled tight at the nape of her neck. Her coat was dark and heavy, far too warm for indoors, and her eyes didn't wander. They locked onto mine as if she'd been searching for me her entire life. "Mrs. Matilda Sterlingford," she said. Not a question, a confirmation. "Yes?" My heart was already racing, though I couldn't have said why. She placed the envelope on the scratched wood between us. Her fingers trembled slightly as she let go, and I noticed dirt under her nails, dark red clay, the kind that only came from one place around here, the north slope of our property. "You'll need this tonight," she whispered, leaning close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke and something sharp, like fear. "Whatever you do, don't open it here. And trust no one. Do you understand me? No one." I opened my mouth to ask who she was, how she knew my name, what she meant, but she was already turning away. By the time I stood, she'd reached the door and slipped outside, swallowed by the mist and traffic. I stood there frozen, staring at the envelope like it might catch fire. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside, I found a brass key, old and heavy, worn smooth by years of use, wrapped in tissue paper, and beneath it, a narrow strip of lined notebook paper folded once. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost mechanical. 11:32 p.m. Answer: don't call back. That was all. No signature, no explanation. I looked up. Through the window, I could see my reflection overlaid against the dark trees. A 67-year-old woman in a cardigan Leopold had given me for Christmas 5 years ago, still wearing her wedding ring, still setting 2 placemats at breakfast, even though there was only one person left to eat. I slid the envelope into my purse and walked out into the cold. The drive home took 20 minutes of winding county roads and gravel driveways. I barely remember it. My mind kept circling back to the woman's face, the desperate urgency in her voice, the key heavy in my pocket. Our house waited at the end of a long drive lined with Douglas firs, white siding, green trim, the same paint Leopold and I had chosen together 30 years ago. 41 acres stretched behind it, cleared fields where we used to grow hay, dense forest climbing up the north slope, and the old barn Leopold had restored piece by piece over the course of a decade. I parked in my usual spot and sat for a moment, looking at the house. It felt different somehow. Not threatening exactly, but watching. Inside, I locked the door, something I'd only started doing after Leopold died. The envelope lay on the kitchen table where I'd placed it, and for a long time I just sat across from it, not touching it, as the afternoon faded into dusk, and dusk bled into night. I thought about calling someone, but who? Rupert? The woman had said trust no one. At 8:47 p.m., I finally opened it again and examined the key more closely. It was old, older than our house, certainly. The kind of key that opened lockboxes or old trunks, heavy and deliberate. I tried to remember if Leopold had ever mentioned something like this, but my memory came up empty. I made tea I didn't drink. I checked the locks on the windows. I stood at the back door and stared out at the barn, dark against the darker tree line, and wondered what secrets it held. At 11:15, I returned to the kitchen table and waited. The house settled around me, creaking beams, the furnace clicking on, the wind pressing against the windows. Normal sounds, but tonight they felt different, loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. 11:31 p.m. My phone sat on the table, screen dark, silent. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my fingertips, behind my eyes. 11:32 p.m. The phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a knife, sharp and sudden and wrong. I flinched hard enough that my chair scraped against the floor. The screen showed no name, no number, just unknown caller in cold gray letters. I answered on the second ring. Hello? My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. At first there was only breathing, slow, controlled, close to the microphone. Then a voice came through, low and distorted as if filtered through something electronic. But underneath the distortion, I heard something that made my blood go cold. A rhythm, a cadence, the particular way the speaker shaped his words. Mathilde. My knees went weak. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. I had heard that voice for over 40 years, in kitchens and fields, in bedrooms and hospital waiting rooms, whispering apologies and laughter and promises. I knew every inflection, every pause, every breath. No, I whispered. This isn't possible. Listen to me carefully, the voice continued. Don't trust Rupert. Don't trust Fabiola. And don't trust the local police. You're not safe where you are. My hand pressed against my mouth to keep from crying out. Tears burned behind my eyes. Who is this? I managed. My husband is dead. Leopold is dead. I was at his funeral. I know what you think happened, the voice interrupted gently. I know what they told you. But Matilda, I need you to understand something. My death wasn't an accident. And if you let them push you out, if you let them take the land, they will erase everything I left behind. Erase what? I whispered. What are you talking about? A pause, a breath. In the background, I thought I heard traffic, distant and muffled. The key opens a lockbox. Not in the house, not in the barn. Where we said our vows, Matilda, where you promised forever. You have 48 hours before they move. After that, everything disappears. Who are you? My voice broke. Please, if this is some kind of sick... I wish I could tell you everything, the voice said, and for the first time I heard emotion bleeding through. Pain, regret, something that sounded almost like grief. I wish I could explain, but if I don't keep this short, they'll find me. Just know that what happened to me wasn't random. It was necessary. They needed me gone. They? They who? You'll understand when you open the box. And Matilda? The voice softened. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I left you alone with this. I tried to handle it myself. I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark. I was wrong. The line crackled violently, static eating the words. The truth is under your feet, the voice said, barely audible through the interference. And you have very little time. The call ended. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear long after the screen went dark, listening to my own ragged breathing, feeling the house shift and settle around me like a living thing. Finally, slowly, I lowered the phone and looked at the call log. Nothing. No record of the incoming call. No duration. No number. As if it had never happened. But my hands were shaking. My face was wet. And the key sat on the table in front of me, solid and real and impossible to ignore. I stood on unsteady legs and walked to the window. Outside, the property stretched into darkness, familiar shapes rendered strange by shadows. The barn crouched at the edge of the tree line. The north slope rose beyond it, crowned with pines that swayed in the wind. Where we said our vows. I knew exactly where that was. Leopold and I had been married on the hillside under the old oak tree 41 years ago this past June. Just the two of us, a justice of the peace, and the land as our witness. If there was a lockbox, that's where it would be. But I couldn't go now. Not in the dark, not alone. Not with my heart still racing and my hands still trembling and the echo of that impossible voice still ringing in my ears. I locked every door. I checked every window. I turned off all the lights except the one over the kitchen sink, and I sat at the table with Leopold's old hunting knife laid out in front of me, just in case, and waited for morning. Sleep never came. I sat there through the long dark hours, watching shadows move across the walls, listening to the house creak and settle, remembering. Leopold in his final year, waking at 2 a.m. to walk the property with a flashlight. Leopold locking the barn when he'd never locked it before. Leopold taking phone calls outside in the rain, speaking in low, urgent tones I couldn't hear. I thought it was grief. The cancer scare 3 years prior, losing his brother to a heart attack, the weight of getting older. I thought he was processing mortality the way men sometimes did. by checking fences, maintaining equipment, making sure everything would be ready for whenever he was gone. Now I wondered what I'd missed. Now I wondered what he'd been trying to tell me. At 6:47 a.m., the sky began to lighten. Not sunrise, just a gradual shift from black to gray. I made coffee. I showered. I dressed in warm clothes and good boots. And then I walked out to the hillside to find whatever Leopold had left behind. The old oak stood where it always had, gnarled and massive, its roots breaking through the earth like the bones of some ancient creature. I'd scattered Leopold's ashes here, at his request, had stood under these branches and said goodbye to the man I'd loved for 4 decades. Now I knelt in the cold dirt at its base and began to dig. The ground was hard, frost-touched, resistant. My nails broke. My fingers bled. But I kept digging, following instinct more than logic, until my hands struck something solid. A metal box, small, heavy, sealed tight against moisture and time. The brass key fit perfectly. Inside I found a USB drive in a sealed plastic bag, a hand-drawn map showing tunnels beneath our barn, tunnels I'd never known existed, a small notebook filled with dates, times, amounts of money that made my stomach turn, and a letter written in Leopold's careful handwriting that began, "My dearest Matilda, if you're reading this, I failed to stop them in time." I read it there, kneeling in the dirt under the oak tree as the Oregon morning turned cold and gray around me, and by the time I reached the final line, "I couldn't do it while I lived. Maybe you can, now that I'm gone." I was crying so hard I could barely see. Not from grief, from rage, because Leopold had carried this alone, had tried to protect me by hiding the truth, had died believing he'd failed, and our son, our only child, the boy we'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, was at the center of everything Leopold had been trying to stop. I stayed there a long time, letting the cold seep into my bones, letting the truth settle into my heart. Then I stood, put the lockbox under my arm, and walked back to the house with the weight of 41 years pressing down on my shoulders. By the time I reached the back door, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. First, Leopold hadn't died in an accident. Second, Rupert and Fabiola were behind it. Third, they were coming for me next, and I had less than 48 hours to decide what to do about it. I didn't go inside right away. I stood on the back porch with the lockbox under my arm, looking at my house, my home, and realizing it had become something else. A crime scene. A trap. A place where secrets had rotted in the walls while I'd gone about my life, making breakfast and tending the garden, and never once suspecting that everything I believed was a lie. The morning sun broke through the clouds, pale and cold, turning the frost on the grass into a field of broken glass. I took a breath, then another. Then I went inside and locked the door behind me. Leopold's office was on the east side of the house, a small room with windows overlooking the barn and the tree line beyond. I'd avoided it for 14 months, kept the door closed, the curtains drawn, as if grief lived in there and might escape if I opened it. Now I understood that something else lived there too. Evidence. Truth. The pieces of a puzzle Leopold had been trying to solve alone. I pushed open the door. The smell hit me first. Cedar and machine oil, the scent of my husband, still lingering like a ghost. His desk sat exactly where he'd left it, papers scattered across the surface, a coffee mug with a ring of dried residue at the bottom. Dust motes swirled in the morning light. I set the lockbox on the desk and looked around the room with new eyes. Where would he have hidden things? Where would Leopold, meticulous, careful Leopold, keep evidence he couldn't risk anyone finding? I started with the filing cabinet. At first, everything looked ordinary. Property tax statements organized by year, insurance policies in manila folders, equipment manuals for tractors we no longer owned. But I forced myself to slow down, to look the way Leopold always had, paying attention to what didn't fit, what seemed out of place. That's when I noticed the dates. Several documents had been moved recently, not removed, just repositioned. File tabs that should have been worn smooth were crisp and new. Papers that should have been at the back of folders were now at the front. A man preparing not to be discovered, but to be understood. I found a thin folder tucked behind the deed paperwork, pushed so far back I almost missed it. Inside were bank statements I'd never seen before, A separate account opened in Leopold's name alone 3 years ago. Cash withdrawals. Small amounts, carefully spaced across months, always under the reporting threshold. Always ending 2 weeks before his death. My chest tightened. Leopold hated cash. He believed in records, receipts, proof of every transaction. If he was withdrawing money like this, it was because he didn't want a trail, because he was paying for something he couldn't put on paper. I kept digging. At the bottom of the drawer, beneath a stack of old farm equipment warranties, I found a folded sheet of yellow legal paper, my name written across the top in his handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Eleanor, if you're reading this, I couldn't stop it the way I hoped. Don't ask questions where ears can listen. The truth is buried, and silence was the only thing that kept you alive. I'm sorry I couldn't be braver. I'm sorry I left you alone with this. But please understand, I did it because I love you more than anything in this world. And some secrets are too dangerous to share with the people we love most. I had to set the paper down, had to press my palms flat against the desk and breathe through the wave of grief and rage that threatened to drown me. He'd known he was in danger and he'd said nothing, had protected me with silence instead of truth, and it had killed him. I wiped my face and turned to his computer. It took me 3 tries to guess his password. Not our anniversary, I'd tried that first. Not my birthday. Not the name of the dog we'd had when we first married. Finally, on impulse, I tried the address of this property, 14250. The screen unlocked. My stomach dropped. Folders I'd never seen before. Files with cryptic names. And buried in a folder labeled Barn Maintenance, where no one would think to look, I found a subfolder called October-December. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, night shots of the North Slope, tire tracks in mud I didn't recognize, a section of forest near the hillside where the ground had been disturbed, soil piled in unnatural mounds, and photos of the barn itself, taken from a distance, showing figures moving equipment in the dark. One photo made my blood run cold. Rupert's truck, parked at an angle near the barn's side entrance. The timestamp read December 14th, 1:47 a.m., less than 12 hours before Leopold died. I clicked to the next photo. 2 men unloading something heavy from the truck bed. One was Rupert. The other I didn't recognize. A large man in a baseball cap, face shadowed. Next photo, Leopold approaching them, flashlight in hand. The final photo was blurred, as if the camera had been jostled. But I could make out shapes. Rupert gesturing angrily, Leopold stepping back, the stranger moving forward with his hand raised. After that, the folder was empty. I sat back in Leopold's chair and stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My son, my only child, the boy who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared him, who'd learned to drive on these same dirt roads, who'd stood beside me at Leopold's funeral with dry eyes and perfect composure, and never once mentioned that he'd seen his father the night before he died. I wanted to scream, to break something, to run to Rupert's house and demand answers. But Leopold's letter echoed in my mind. Don't ask questions where ears can listen. If I confronted Rupert directly, if I showed my hand too soon, I'd lose my only advantage. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Hayes Law Firm, this is Bradford Hayes speaking. Bradford, it's Matilda Stirlingford. A pause. Matilda, how are you holding up? Bradford had been Leopold's attorney for 30 years, handled the will, the property trust, every legal document my husband had ever signed. He was 73 years old, sharp as a tack, and one of the few people in this town Leopold had trusted completely. I need to see you, I said. Today. And Bradford, this stays between us. No one can know we met. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. Does this have to do with Leopold? Yes. All right. Come to my house, not the office. 2 o'clock. Park around back. Thank you. I hung up and checked the time. 9:47 a.m. 4 hours to prepare. I copied everything from the computer onto a fresh USB drive. Photographed every document in the filing cabinet. Took pictures of the lockbox contents with my phone, uploading them to a cloud storage account Leopold had set up years ago. One more precaution I hadn't understood until now. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. If someone came looking, they'd find an old woman's grief-stricken office, untouched since her husband's death. Nothing more. At 1:45 p.m., I got in my car and drove to Bradford's house on the other side of town. Bradford lived in a neat colonial with a detached garage and a yard full of oak trees. I parked behind the garage as instructed and knocked on the back door. He opened it immediately, ushering me inside with a worried expression. "Matilda, what's this about?" I handed him the USB drive. "Leopold left evidence. About Rupert. About what's been happening on our land. I need you to watch this, and then I need your help." We sat in his study while he plugged the drive into his laptop. I watched his face as he scrolled through the photos, the bank statements, the documents. Watched his expression shift from curiosity to concern to something that looked like horror. When he finished, he sat back and removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Good God," he said quietly. "Matilda, do you understand what this means? That my son was involved in something illegal, that Leopold found out, that—" my voice broke. "That Rupert might have had something to do with Leopold's death." Bradford was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter on his shelf. He handed me one. "Leopold came to see me 3 months before he died," Bradford said slowly. "He asked me to update your property trust, added provisions that would trigger if anything happened to him, financial safeguards, legal protections. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough. Now you know he was preparing." "Yes." Bradford sat back down heavily. "Matilda, this evidence suggests criminal activity on your property, possibly smuggling, given the tunnel system indicated in these maps. And if Rupert was involved, if Leopold confronted him, then my son killed his father." The words hung in the air between us, too terrible to take back. Bradford leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" I took a sip of whiskey. It burned going down, sharp and clarifying. "I want to know the truth, all of it, and I want Rupert to tell me himself." "That's dangerous." "I know." "He could—" Bradford hesitated. "Matilda, if he's capable of what we're suggesting, then I need to be smart." I met his eyes. "I need to make him think I'm cooperating, draw him out, get him to admit what he's done." "You want to set a trap?" "Yes." Bradford studied me for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this my way. I'm calling a contact I have at the FBI." "No police," I said sharply. "Not yet. Leopold said not to trust the local police. If there's corruption, if someone warned Rupert that Leopold was investigating, then we bring in federal authorities and keep the locals out of it entirely." Bradford pulled out his phone. "I have a friend who works organized crime. She'll know what to do. But Matilda, once we start this, there's no going back." "I know." He made the call, spoke in low tones for several minutes. When he hung up, he looked at me with something like respect. "They're interested, very interested, but they need more than photos and suspicions. They need a confession or evidence of ongoing criminal activity, or both." "Then I'll get it for them." "How?" I stood, setting down my empty glass. "By giving Rupert exactly what he wants." I called Rupert from Bradford's driveway. He answered on the second ring. "Mom? Is everything okay?" Such a normal voice. Such ordinary concern. As if he hadn't threatened me with guardianship 3 days ago. As if his truck hadn't been at our barn the night his father died. "Rupert," I said, letting my voice shake slightly. Not hard, given the circumstances. "I've been thinking about what you and Fabiola said. About the property. About everything." A pause. "Yeah? I think you're right. This place is too much for me. I'm ready to sell." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear him recalibrating, adjusting his approach. Mom, that's great. That's really great. I'm proud of you for making this decision. But I need to understand something first." I took a breath. "What are you planning to do with the land? Really? I want to know my home is going to something good." "Of course. We're planning to, well, Fabiola has some ideas about development. Sustainable, you know. Low impact. Can we talk about it? Tonight? Both of you? I want to understand the whole plan before I sign anything." Another pause. Longer this time. "Sure, yeah, we can do that. What time?" 8 o'clock. Just family, just us." "Okay, we'll be there." His voice softened, became almost gentle. Mom, I know this isn't easy, but I promise you're making the right choice. I hope so, I said, and meant it. I hung up and sat in my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to prepare myself for what was coming. Bradford had agreed to stay on call, ready to alert his FBI contact the moment things went wrong. I had a panic button Leopold had installed 2 years ago, a small device under the kitchen table that would trigger a silent alarm and send alerts to emergency services. And I had the truth, documented and uploaded and safely out of Rupert's reach, even if something happened to me. It would have to be enough. At 7:45 p.m., I turned on every light in the house, made it look warm, welcoming, safe. Then I turned most of them back off, leaving just the kitchen lit, the way I always did. I set out coffee cups, put Leopold's old hunting knife in the drawer by the sink within reach, placed my phone on this table, camera app open to audio recording, hidden under a dish towel, and I waited. At exactly 8 o'clock, I heard tires on gravel. Through the window, I watched Rupert's truck pull into the driveway. Both doors opened. Rupert emerged first, carrying a folder. Fabiola followed, dressed in dark slacks and a silk blouse, looking more like she was heading to a business meeting than visiting her mother-in-law. I opened the door before they could knock. Come in, I said. Coffee's ready. They settled at the kitchen table. Rupert looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room. Fabiola looked calm, controlled, a slight smile on her perfectly painted lips. So, Fabiola said, folding her hands on the table, you're ready to move forward. I want to understand what you're planning first, I said carefully. This land has been in Leopold's family for 3 generations. I need to know it's going to something worthwhile. Rupert jumped in quickly. Absolutely. We're thinking residential development, small lots, eco-friendly homes, keep the character of the area. And the barn? I asked. What happens to that? Fabiola's eyes narrowed slightly. The barn is old, Matilda. Probably needs to be demolished for safety reasons. Demolished. I let the word hang in the air. Leopold spent 10 years restoring that barn. He always said it was solid, built to last. Buildings deteriorate, Fabiola said smoothly, especially when they're not maintained. Is that why you need the land? I asked. For development? That's part of it, Rupert said. I turned to look at my son, really look at him. When had he learned to lie so easily? When had the boy who used to tell me everything become this stranger? I went through your father's office today, I said quietly. Rupert went very still. I found some interesting things. Photos, documents, bank statements. I paused. A letter. Mom, Rupert started. He knew, Rupert, about the tunnels under the barn, about whatever you've been using them for, about the people you've been working with. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. He documented everything. The room went silent. Fabiola's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of something cold and calculating. Then she smiled. Matilda, I think you're confused. Grief can do that. Make us see patterns that aren't... I'm not confused, I said. I swiped through my phone and pulled up one of Leopold's photos, turned it so they could see. This is your truck, Rupert, at our barn, December 14th, the night before your father died. Rupert's face went white. He confronted you, didn't he? Told you he was going to report you. And 12 hours later, his car went off the road. That was an accident, Rupert said, but his voice shook. Mom, you can't think. Then explain the photo. Silence. Fabiola stood abruptly. Rupert, we should go. No. Rupert didn't move. He stared at me with something like desperation. Mom, please, let me explain. Then explain. He took a shuddering breath. I was in debt. Gambling debt. Bad people, Mom. The kind who don't take excuses. I was drowning, and Fabiola, she found a way out. Used the land. The tunnels Dad discovered while hunting. Just temporarily, just until I paid off what I owed. What kind of debt requires underground tunnels? Rupert didn't answer. What have you been moving? I pressed. Drugs? Stolen goods? What? It doesn't matter anymore, Fabiola said coldly. What matters is you're going to sign those papers, Matilda, tonight. And if I don't? Fabiola's hand moved to her purse. When it emerged, she was holding a small black pistol. The world seemed to slow down. Fabiola, what are you doing? Rupert stood, his chair scraping back. Put that away. Sit down, Rupert. Fabiola's voice was ice. Your mother is a problem, just like Leopold was a problem, and we solve problems. I stared at her. You killed Leopold. Leopold killed himself by not minding his own business. She kept the gun pointed at my chest. We tried to scare him, tried to reason with him, but he was stubborn. So yes, I arranged for his little accident. Rupert chased him, just like I told him to, kept him rattled. And when his car went into that lake, I tried to save him, Rupert said desperately. Mom, I swear, I dove in, I tried. You tried nothing, Fabiola snapped. You sat on the shore and cried while I made sure there were no witnesses. You're weak, Rupert, just like your father. That's why you need me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My son had been there when Leopold died, had watched him drown. Now, Fabiola continued, her voice businesslike, here's what's going to happen. Matilda is going to have a tragic heart attack. So much stress, losing her husband, living alone. Rupert will be devastated, of course. And once the property transfers to him, I lunged for the panic button under the table. Fabiola fired. The sound was deafening in the small kitchen. Pain exploded in my left shoulder, hot and sharp and overwhelming. I fell backward, hitting the floor hard. Mom! Rupert's scream seemed to come from very far away. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard sirens. No, not sirens. An alarm. The panic button. I'd managed to hit it before I fell. Fabiola cursed viciously. We need to go. Now. We can't just leave her. She's evidence, Rupert. She's already uploaded everything. We need to disappear before— No! To my shock, Rupert grabbed Fabiola's arm. I'm not leaving my mother to die. You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing to stop! Rupert's voice broke. This is insane. We killed my father. And now you want to— No. No more. Fabiola raised the gun toward Rupert. I don't know where I found the strength. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was 41 years of loving my son despite everything he'd done. Maybe it was just rage. I rolled onto my side, grabbed the table leg, and pulled myself up enough to grab the coffee pot and hurl it at Fabiola. Hot coffee and ceramic exploded across her face. She screamed, the gun flying from her hand. Rupert grabbed it, stood there shaking, holding the weapon awkwardly, pointing it at his wife. It's over, he said quietly. Fabiola, it's over. And then the front door burst open, and the house filled with people in FBI jackets, voices shouting, lights blazing. I collapsed back to the floor, pressing my hand against my shoulder, watching blood seep between my fingers. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Rupert's face, my son's face, twisted with anguish and something that might have been relief. I woke up in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and plastic flowers. The first thing I saw was white ceiling tiles. The second was an IV line running into my left arm. The third was Bradford Hayes sitting in a chair by the window, reading a newspaper with the patience of a man who'd been waiting a long time. Bradford? My voice came out as a croak. He folded the paper immediately and stood, relief flooding his weathered face. Matilda, thank God. How are you feeling? Like I've been shot. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. Pain radiated from my shoulder, dull and insistent. What happened? Is Fabiola in federal custody? Rupert, too. Bradford poured water from a pitcher and helped me drink. The FBI arrived 4 minutes after you hit the panic button, found you unconscious on the kitchen floor, Fabiola with burns on her face, and Rupert holding a gun he clearly didn't know how to use. According to the agents, he surrendered immediately, kept asking if you were alive. I closed my eyes. The memory came back in fragments. The explosion of the gunshot, the hot coffee hitting Fabiola's face, Rupert's anguished scream. The recording, I said. Did they? They have everything. The audio from your phone, the evidence Leopold left behind, and Fabiola's confession. She admitted to arranging Leopold's death right there in your kitchen. It's over, Matilda. They have enough to prosecute both of them. Both of them. I turned my head to look out the window. Rain streaked the glass, turning the parking lot below into a blur of gray. Rupert, too. He was there the night Leopold died. He chased his father to that lake. Even if he didn't pull the trigger, metaphorically speaking, he's culpable. The FBI is offering him a plea deal if he testifies against Fabiola and the larger criminal network. But Matilda, Bradford's voice gentled. He's still going to prison. I nodded slowly. Some part of me had known this would be the ending from the moment I'd opened that lockbox under the oak tree. Justice didn't care about Mother's love. It only cared about truth. How long was I out? 2 days. The bullet went through your shoulder, clean through, missed the bone. You lost a lot of blood, but the doctors say you'll make a full recovery. He paused. You're tougher than you look, Matilda Stirlingford. I had a good teacher. My voice broke on the last word. Bradford squeezed my hand and said nothing. Some griefs were too deep for comfort. They kept me in the hospital for 5 more days. Bradford visited every afternoon, bringing news and paperwork and occasionally a chocolate milkshake from the diner downtown. The FBI came twice to take my statement, their questions precise and clinical, treating me like a witness instead of a victim. I preferred it that way. On the 6th day, Bradford arrived with a different kind of news. Rupert asked if you'd come see him. I'd been expecting this, dreading it. Where is he? County jail, awaiting transfer to a federal facility. He's already signed the plea agreement, 15 years for conspiracy, manslaughter, and obstruction. With good behavior, he could be out in 12. Bradford watched my face carefully. You don't have to go, Matilda. No one would blame you if you didn't. I know. I looked down at my hands, still bruised from digging in the dirt under the oak tree, nails still broken, healing slowly. But I think Leopold would want me to. Leopold would want you to do whatever keeps you whole. Then I need to see him, just once, to say what needs to be said. Bradford drove me there 3 days later, after I'd been released from the hospital with my arm in a sling and a prescription for painkillers I had no intention of taking. I needed to feel everything, even if it hurt. Especially if it hurt. The county jail was a squat concrete building that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. We went through security, surrendered our phones and keys, and were led to a visitation room divided by thick plexiglass. Rupert was already sitting on the other side when they brought me in. He looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, with shadows under his eyes and the kind of stillness that came from being forced to sit with your own thoughts for too long. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. When he saw me, his face crumpled. I sat down slowly, picked up the phone on my side of the glass. He did the same. Mom, his voice was raw. I'm so sorry. I don't even know how to... Don't. I cut him off, my voice steady. Don't apologize. Not yet. First, I need you to answer a question. He nodded, tears already streaming down his face. Did you love him? Your father. Did you love him? Rupert's face twisted with anguish. Yes, God, yes. God. I loved him so much. That's why He broke off, pressing his hand against the glass. I wanted to make him proud. Be the son he deserved. But I kept screwing up, kept making bad choices, and the debt just kept getting bigger and I was so ashamed. So you compounded it by lying. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just used the tunnels for a few months, paid off what I owed, I could walk away clean and Dad would never have to know. His voice broke. But he found out. And when he said he was calling the police, I panicked. Fabiola said if I just scared him, just made him understand how serious this was, he'd stay quiet. For my sake. For family. But Leopold wasn't the kind of man who stayed quiet when something was wrong. No. Rupert's laugh was bitter. No, he wasn't. And I chased him. I was screaming at him to stop, to listen, and he just kept driving faster, and then his breath hitched. The road was wet. He took the curve too fast. The car went into the water. I jumped in, Mom, I swear I jumped in, but it was so dark and so cold and I couldn't find him, and Fabiola told you to leave him. Rupert's silence was answer enough. I closed my eyes, seeing it. My son standing on that dark shore, torn between saving his father and saving himself, and choosing wrong. When did you stop being my Rupert? I asked quietly. When did you become someone I don't recognize? I don't know. His voice was barely a whisper. Somewhere along the way I just got lost, and instead of asking for help, I kept pretending everything was fine, kept lying, kept digging deeper. He looked at me through the glass, his eyes pleading. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all to make this right? I thought about that for a long time. About Leopold's letter, about the weight of secrets, about the difference between justice and revenge. Yes, I said finally. You can serve your time. All of it. No appeals, no early release unless you truly earn it. You can testify against Fabiola and everyone else involved, and you can help the FBI dismantle the network that killed your father. I will. I promise I will. And when you get out, if you get out, you can spend the rest of your life becoming the man your father hoped you'd be. Not for me, not even for his memory, but because it's the right thing to do. Rupert nodded, unable to speak. I loved you from the moment you were born, I said, and my voice finally broke. I would have done anything for you, died for you. But I can't forgive you for this, Rupert. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Do you understand? Yes. Your father loved you until his last breath. Even knowing what you'd done, even drowning in that dark water, I believe he loved you. And because of that love, I came here today. But this is the last time. Mom, please. Goodbye, Rupert. I hung up the phone and stood. Rupert pressed his hand against the glass, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear, tears streaming down his face. I turned and walked away. Bradford was waiting in the lobby. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions, just guided me to the car and drove me home in silence. The farm was quiet when we pulled up the long driveway. The FBI had released the property after their investigation, the tunnels sealed with concrete, the barn marked with yellow caution tape that snapped in the October wind. What will you do now? Bradford asked as I unbuckled my seatbelt. I'm going to keep it, I said. The land, the house, all of it. Are you sure? After everything? Especially after everything. I looked out at the property stretching into the distance, at the north slope rising toward the tree line. Leopold died protecting this place from being corrupted. I'm not going to let his death be for nothing. Bradford smiled. He'd be proud of you, Mathilde. I hope so. I opened the car door, then paused. Bradford? Thank you. For believing me, for helping me. That's what friends do. I watched him drive away, then turned to face my house, my home, and felt something shift inside me. Not healing exactly, but the beginning of it. The first fragile thread of whatever came after survival. Over the following months, I made decisions. I hired contractors to restore the barn properly, turning it into a community workshop where local kids could learn woodworking and metalwork, the skills Leopold had loved teaching. His tools would be used again, his knowledge passed on. I leased 20 acres of the cleared land to a young couple, Jackson and Emily Morrison, who wanted to start an organic farm. They reminded me of Leopold and me 40 years ago, full of hope and hard work and dreams bigger than their bank account. I designated the North Slope as a nature preserve, worked with the state to protect it from development forever, let the land heal itself the way I was learning to heal. And one cool morning in late November, I climbed the hill to the old oak tree one last time. I brought a small tin box, the kind Leopold and I had buried on our wedding day, full of love letters and promises. This one contained different treasures. Leopold's wedding ring, which I'd worn on a chain around my neck for 14 months. A photo of our family when Rupert was 10, all of us laughing, still intact. And a letter I'd written to my husband, saying all the things I'd never had the chance to say. I dug a hole at the base of the oak and placed the box inside, covered it with earth, and patted the soil smooth. I did what you asked, I said aloud to the wind and the trees and the ghost of the man I'd loved. I found the truth. I made sure they answered for what they did. And I'm keeping our land safe. You can rest now, Leopold, you can rest. The wind sighed through the branches, carrying the scent of pine and rain and earth. I stood there until the sun broke through the clouds, warming my face. Then I walked back down the hill to the house that was still standing, still mine, still full of memories both terrible and precious. I'm 67 years old. I've lost my husband to murder and my son to his own choices. I've been shot in my own kitchen and learned that the people closest to me were capable of unthinkable betrayal. But I'm still here. And I've learned something Leopold tried to teach me all those years, that strength isn't about never falling. It's about what you do after you hit the ground. The farm goes on. The land endures. And every morning when I wake up in this house, when I make my coffee and look out at the acres Leopold loved, I choose to keep going. Not because I've forgiven everything, Not because the pain has faded, but because the truth, however terrible, is what keeps us alive. And some legacies are worth fighting for, even when the fight costs you everything you thought you couldn't live without. The most dangerous betrayal is the one that grows quietly inside family, taking root in the dark until it chokes everything good. But the strongest legacy is the one you choose to leave behind, built not on silence and secrets, but on truth and the courage to face it. Even when it destroys you, even when it saves you, even when it becomes the only thing left that feels like home.